Another episode of the Square and Compass podcast. This time on the East Coast, visiting Newfoundland to discuss something I've tried to promote a lot in Ontario, but really it should be something that's promoted nationally and even internationally for any Masonic building that's out there. The preservation and the promotion and really the protection of our Masonic built assets, our Masonic temples, cathedrals, buildings, call them what you want. They are an incredibly important part of a lot of communities in Canada and across the world, and far too often they're being lost, sold, demolished, but not in Newfoundland, where Twillingate Masonic Lodge, which I learned about very recently, has done an amazing job at promoting and preserving their building. So we're here with Right Worshipful Brother Vatcher and Brother Hallwell from Twillingate Masonic Lodge down in Newfoundland. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
So yeah, my question at the start is, tell me a little bit about Twillingate. Tell me about your building and kind of what you've been doing, the work you've been doing on its preservation and promotion.
Sure, I can probably give, just to say that Brother Howell has been heavily involved in the last couple of years. Prior to him joining the lodge, of course, we had started looking at this. A little bit of history. The lodge was formed in 1889. The building was completed in 1906, consecrated 1907. When I joined in 96, and shortly after that, became really apparent that there was a lot of work needed to be done on the building. Estimates put it up close to $100,000. We had 56 members in a community of 2,500. So we had to try to look at different ways to raise funds, and we did. The usual thing, renting our hall out to the public, various things like that, but that wasn't coming close. So around that time, we started looking around, and we got Heritage Newfoundland and Labrador status. And because of that, then we could apply for grants. First, it was on a 50-50 basis. The government changed it to 30-70, where we would have to come up with 70% of the funds. And over the last few years, we've done about $50,000 worth of work. This year, the most recent grant is running at about $24,000 from Heritage Newfoundland, of which we're able to match because of our fundraising efforts. And we're going to get somewhere around another $50,000 worth of work done on the exterior of the building this year.
Well, what was it like for the lodge, membership-wise? What did lodge members think when you began the grant application process, or even just exploring that these grants and this type of funding as a possibility? Because a lot of lodges, in my experience, it seems like, and their membership, it's not that they're not supportive exactly. It's more like many of them don't even realize what's available. What was it like for the lodge membership when they first, when this idea was broached, or the exploration process began?
I think for the membership, I think we all knew that we had an immense challenge. And once these opportunities came to light, so that we had a way of preserving the building, because it was important to us. Obviously, it's our building here in Twillingate. It's an historic property here, so it's twofold. They were very open to it. They were, because with a small lodge and a small membership, even though we had 56 members, you really only have about 20 or 25 that are regular. And so, yeah, I mean, they were quite receptive to looking at that kind of avenue.
We've been exploring it like actively, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. We had a project done a couple of years, well, in 2020, which restored the back of our building, and we tried to restore it to what we believe to be the historical colors of the building. We had only had to go by original black and white photos, but we've since discovered some things in our historical minutes that, our colors are close. And like Brother Batcher mentioned, that hopefully this summer we'll have the other three sides finished by the end of the summer or late September, or at the very latest, hopefully. But Heritage NL has been very good to us, very supportive, and there are other programs, as you mentioned. We just discovered another one recently from Trades NL. It's only for small grants, but you can up to $2,000. But if a lodge needs anything inside, you could, apply to them for that. Every year we apply to Canada Jobs program, so we get a tour guide that we get trained up on, and he conducts tours during the summer. So, and when there are others in the long term, I think we may even look towards ACOA, which is Atlantic Canada's Opportunity Agency, to see if there's any relationship that we can have with them. Like Brother Vatcha said, our building is 115 years old. 116, I guess, technically. There is a lot of work to be done. And it's not just about bringing it up to, to where it needs, or to make it presentable, but we'd like to see it preserved for, future generations as well.
Tell me about the initial application process. When the first set of grants, you were beginning the application process, what type of information was required? Was there anything that caught you off guard? Like, I guess if another Masonic building is considering applying for grants, whether they be local, municipal, up to federal, what's some advice that you would have based on your experiences with the grant application process, especially those first few steps of just getting started?
Yes, well, there were some discussions, because when you're a heritage building, and once you apply for that first grant, you give up some control over what you can do with the exterior of the building. Everything has to be kept period sensitive, according to Heritage NL's standards. The interior is different. You can still make renovations or changes to the interior. That was a little bit of concern for some members, in that they felt, I don't know if they were totally comfortable giving up some control. But Heritage NL was pretty reasonable. I think and we really didn't have any dispute with the fact that we wanted the building to be as it should be, back to that period. Like Brother Howell has mentioned, trying to get as close to the original colors as possible. What trims were what colors, the whole thing. So, and we're not just doing it for ourselves, of course, we're doing it for the community as a whole, because this is a community building. It's one that's been used by the community for years, and we want to try to maintain it as possible. But that was probably the only concern.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's something I really want to take a moment and focus on. It's something I, with Square and Compass, has really been trying to emphasize, and through my work with the Windsor Masonic Temple. Yes, a Masonic building is a Masonic home, but it's also a community center, and it's a part of the community. I can tell you, with my experience applying for grants, one of the biggest hurdles and one of the biggest challenges has been showing to the grant, the organization, the government agency, whatever it is that's providing the grant, showing that we're not just, the Windsor Masonic Temple is not simply a Masonic home, but is a part of the community life. When you were applying for these grants, what type of things did you do, or how did you involve the community, or did you demonstrate to the grant agencies, the community aspect of the building, and the fact that it is not just a part of Masonic life, but of community life?
Yeah, I'm going to go for the early part, John. Then I'm going to I want you to come in with what we dealt with in the last grant. But at the beginning, we could clearly demonstrate at that time that it was used as a performance venue in the community. It was also a place that people could rent or whatever for either for meetings, and this would be the social room, not the our meeting room as such on the second floor. And people could get it for birthday parties. It was it was something that the community used. So we could, at that point in time, we could easily demonstrate to Heritage NL that there was a benefit to the community as a whole. And this is a tourism destination too, as well. Twillingate is, and certainly an historic building in the community that's maintained is part of that tourism package, let's say. And John, maybe you can speak to the historical part that we did in the last one.
Sure. Now, with our most recent grant with Heritage NL, they changed their system, I guess you want to, for lack of a better word, this year. Instead of just basically a restoration grant, they were calling it a revitalization grant. And they wanted to invest in projects that had demonstrated community partnerships. So one of the angle that we worked with here was with respect to, well, we're a 133-year-old organization, and we have historical documents going back to that time. And we emphasize the fact that, the names of our members, our grandfathers and great-grandfathers and so forth, are all members or names that you would find in the town. So it's versus, we have 3 other museums here in town and some older churches, and they have a certain amount of records as well. But I mean, church records tend to be, births, deaths, and births, baptisms, marriages, and deaths and burials. But the Masonic records actually can offer another dimension to the history of the town and the people who've lived here. So we pushed that, and we gained some good partnerships. We did a presentation with several organizations in town, including 2 museums and the cultural center in Crowhead. And we got letters of support from them. So basically, Heritage NL is also going to help us basically teach us or present some workshops for us on how to properly maintain our historical records, which tend to be right now just in cardboard boxes, which, where they've been placed, over the years and basically left. So we're trying to digitize that and get it into proper filing cabinets and index properly, and make it available to, in particular for anybody who has a Masonic connection. It's not like it'll be vastly used, I don't think, but it's important, I think, that the lodge maintains all their historical records and it becomes accessible. Already we're finding that there's a lot of stories that have been long forgotten by the records just sitting in the boxes. So that was the angle that we went with Heritage NL this time. And anyway, it was successful. And Heritage NL will be out with us, they hope, in either late August or early September. And they'll do these workshops for the lodge, members of the lodge, and as well people who we signed on as partners.
That is very cool to hear. I've been pushing really hard for the preservation of or the digital archiving of Masonic documentation. We have the same thing here. We have documents going back over 100 years, correspondence, letters. And I've been pushing hard for lodges to apply for grants or, if they want to pay for themselves, but do what's necessary to get that information preserved digitally. So it's not, obviously part of it is you want to preserve the actual hard copies as much as you can.
Sure.
But also, knock on wood, flooding, damage, fire, road, whatever it is, right? You want that information preserved digitally as well. And I've been pushing lodges to really consider and take a look at that also.
that was our concern too, around the documents. And I think right now, John, we have up in the cloud all minutes from 1889 to
Yes,
to
all
present.
minutes are now.
Yeah.
They're not exactly indexed the way we want them yet, but we have our
Well-
summer tour guide in his spare time. He's doing a certain amount that will help that process, and eventually they'll be searchable and well, a lot more accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful to hear this. I got to ask, like, what's your secret? I know so many lodges trying to do the things that you guys have already done, either trying to get lodges or the membership to support the work or to do the work. What is it about Twillingate? You guys seem to be ahead of the curve, far more ahead than a lot of lodges and buildings are in these efforts. What would you say? What is it that has motivated the lodge to engage in this work and be so successful at it?
We're still only at the very start of this, to be perfectly honest. There's a lot of work to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we estimate roughly 10 to 15,000 documents. Some are pretty mundane. Some may be only like invoices and bills and this sort of thing from local vendors over the years when they bought kerosene back in the day and that sort of thing to light the lodges. But even from that, you can get a certain amount. But I've taken a good bit of this on myself as far as the records go, but it's gaining momentum in the lodge, and with more emphasis put on this by Heritage NL as well. It will be a project that probably spans 4 or 5 years before it's done, right? And coming up with policies on document management and such like that for going forward as well.
And I think, John, we've been lucky too. I would put it that way, that we've got a mix of brethren there now who are engaged in this. Just to say, John comes from a technical background, so that's been an advantage. I myself have never been shy of using social media and whatnot. This is one way we brought ourselves out into the community early. We had a social media presence early in the game, and I think part of it too is the restoration of the building is one thing. That's some more of an act of desperation, shall we say. You had to do what you had to do to try to maintain that building. But the recognition that we've got a lot of valuable documents there, that's something that's come lately. And this Heritage NL thing is just happened to, the cogs just happened to fit at the right time. They needed a good example. This is a pilot project too, John, that Heritage NL is doing. And they looked at past experience with us and an example to show how a revitalization grant can actually be not just for that building, but can be for the community as a whole. And so they've, so it'd be interesting. We're really looking forward to working through the process.
They have some great people at Heritage NL as well. I mean, they are very much concerned about these types of projects. And whereas I think historically a lot of the focus has been in around St. John's, which is a major population center. This particular year, they were trying to get projects in more rural areas. So we lined up there very well as well.
Yeah.
Now, we talked a little bit about it, but I want to go back in a little bit more detail. What has the response from the community been like? Both, you talked about doing some presentations with museums and community presentations, but even just to the work itself being done, the preservation work. What has the response from Twillingate been like?
Very good, very supportive. And they've also been very supportive of our fundraising efforts that we do, because they know that it's going to the building fund. They know that it's something that's going to enhance the community as a whole. And yeah, we've had really good feedback on what we're trying to do there.
We have a businessman who has an enterprise close by our lodge, who grew up right next to the lodge, and he's been a very good supporter. He's hosted events in his he owns a dinner theater there. Ernie Watkins is his name, and a much bigger venue than we can hold. And we've done concerts there. And I should add that we have a few musical people in our lodge, including Brother Vatcher, who's along with a few other people in the lodge, and a few, as we call, friends of their name is Not So Righteous Brothers. But we've hosted large concerts at his place, and he's been very supportive of lodge, restoring the lodge to what he knew it to be when he was a boy, and that sort of thing. And there's others as well. And everybody seems to be interested in wanting to see the place look its best, right? So.
And it is located right in the middle of town, right? It's right
Yes.
right in the middle of town. It's a very prominent structure. So yeah, and he's just to add to that. I mean, Ernie has been really supportive. For example, we did one show, dinner and a show down there. He gave us the bar, the whole works, and we realized from that one night about $6,500.
Yeah, so that's a major fundraiser for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And is Ernie a Mason himself?
No.
See, I think that's a really good point that a lot of Masons, well, people in general, but Masons especially don't seem to understand, right? Is that especially in some of these heritage buildings, these old properties, the building may be incredibly important to members of the community that have no connection to the craft. They may have memories in there coming from any number of reasons growing up next to it, and so often I think our lodges, our buildings forget about that. They think about how important the building may be to the membership, to the Masons, but not to the broader community. And you lose those opportunities for fundraising, for outreach, for support. And I think that, again, what you guys are doing and talking about is a perfect example of why kind of the myopic view a lot of Masons seem to have towards their buildings or towards the craft, which is that it's for Masons only. Whereas I think what you guys are showing with the building is that no, even if somebody's not a Mason, Masonry can be important to them. The building can be important to them, and what Masonry brings to the community can be important to them, which I think is a great thing. I think a lot of lodges can learn from that. A lot of Masons can learn from that.
Well, as we were taught, you're taught to be a better character, to be leaders in the community, and I think you lead by example. And again, if you go back a number of years ago, when I say a number, I'm talking about 50 years ago, nobody could go into that building or view the upstairs meeting room unless you were a Mason. That was the rule here back, I would say, prior to the 80s. And now that we were doing tours, and whenever we have a function at the lodge where the community is there, we'll invite them to go upstairs and view the meeting room. And I guess you've seen some pictures of the inside, have you, there? And I mean, this was constructed at a time when there were two economic centers in Newfoundland, St. John's and Twillingate, largely due to the fishing industry. And most of the founding members of the Twillingate Lodge were merchants and whatnot who were involved in that trade, and they put up quite a beautiful building there. And for the public, a majority of the public had never seen it, and to see them when they come into that room and look around and go, "Wow, I didn't know this was in my community." And I think that's.
I did a tour yesterday, Rob. I'm sorry to interrupt. Again, the same thing. Been coming to Twillingate for 50 years, and this is the first time they were ever up there, and we're amazed. We're amazed at the beauty of that room, actually, right?
Yeah. So I think that's part of the outreach in the community too, that the community sees that there's something special there, and it's accessible. It's for them to use. We had recently had a mental illness seminar here who were looking to rent the building, and we said, no, you can have it for free. It was a good community thing that they were doing. They were doing some mental health workshops, and we said, hey, look, that's a good cause. Here, use the building. So that carries a long way, and especially in a small community.
And I guess what would either of you or both of you, what would you say to those Masons who tend to pop up everywhere? Though it didn't sound like in Twillingate, but who pop up in many places, who would argue, or who argue that, you know, Masonic buildings are Masonic buildings, that, you know, they should be kept private. They should, you know, they shouldn't be, the community shouldn't be invited to it or part of it. You know, I've heard stories of, say, when there's a Masonic function and a wedding happening at the same time, of Masons kind of walking through the wedding because it's their building type of thing. I mean, I guess what would you say to Masons who take that attitude towards their buildings or their properties, that it's a private club as opposed to a community center?
I think the private part of it would be obviously when we're having our meetings, and but other than that, I think really, if you keep Masonry and the people who are involved in it too secret, you lose an opportunity, because really we need to be demonstrating to the community that, you know, we're worthy members of that community. And I think that personally myself, I don't want to prejudge another brother on their thoughts and opinions, but I don't think that kind of secrecy is going to serve us well at this juncture in Masonry, while we're trying to attract members and whatnot. I think we need to be not completely open, but more open than we were in the past for that kind of thing. And really, again, like I say, we want to be seen as a part of the community, not some people in the community or meet in a private enclave who, you know, nobody knows what's inside the building, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the community outreach part and opening up, I mean, I think it will go a long way to actually addressing what is a membership crisis really in Newfoundland. I'm not sure about everywhere else, but we have an aging population. We have the oldest demographic in Canada, and in rural Newfoundland, it's worse again than in the more urban centers. Our average age in the lodge is nearing 70 years old. So we need to attract younger members and you know, so that we can pass this on to the next generation. Otherwise, if it doesn't happen, there won't be a generation to pass it on to, I don't think.
Well, you know, that's, I think the membership crisis is pretty well established, or I think it's pretty much consistent throughout North America. There are some jurisdictions where it's growing slowly, but overall, I mean, the numbers in North America are plummeting fairly rapidly. Not in every jurisdiction. In an interesting note, Cuba is growing pretty well there. You know, what are some of the, I guess, do you see that the work that you're doing in Twillingate as something that can kind of arrest, or if not reverse the decline in membership, at least slow it down sufficiently that maybe it can it'll take I think it'll take a lot of different programs to turn it around, but it seems like the work being done in Twillingate and Windsor and other places might be something that could hopefully at least arrest this, if not reverse it.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. You know, we live in a different type of society now than was prevalent 60 years ago or 70 years ago, in that everybody now, you don't need a social outlet. Everybody's got one of these laptops, or you can stream movies, you can do whatever. Everybody's got their home entertainment centers. So you really have to, you know, hopefully present yourself as an alternative, something different that you can do. I don't know, to be honest with you, if the things that we are doing here are going to show any results with regard to membership. I do know that within the Grand Lodge in Newfoundland, we have checked off pretty well every box that they have there, whether we're involved in Christmas parades, we're, you know, given scholarships at the school. This the full gamut of things that they've suggested. We were ahead of them. We had a lot of it in place anyhow, but we really haven't seen the results on that end yet. Now that may change. You know, I don't want to be a pessimist. I prefer to be an optimist, but sometimes you had to be a realist, and hopefully, you know, like I say, some of the things we're doing here, hopefully we'll see something, a result for it. What do you think, John?
Well, I do agree with you. I mean, you know, turning the membership issue around is like, you know, turning an aircraft carrier around. It's not done in a bathtub for sure.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have to try and do the right things, and try to engage the community in the most positive light possible. And if it yields results, you know, well, that's super. But in the meantime, I think it's important to know that we're doing the right thing, you know, for the community in general, as far as the building goes, and you know, just knowing that we're a contributing force in the community. Not to do something is not an option, I don't.
No, true.
I agree with that sentiment completely. And you know, there's different numbers that are relevant to Freemasonry, right? There's membership as a whole, which is one metric, one number, but then there's also attendance and involvement from Masons. You know, sometimes I think so much emphasis is placed on acquiring new members. Freemasons forget about the importance of ensuring that, you know, the members that you have already are active. I mean, I know earlier in this interview you mentioned, at least at the time you started the grant application process, Twillingate had about 56 members, with about 25 attending, which 50% attendance is a good number compared to a lot of other jurisdictions I know, which is not getting near about 50%. Has the grant applications, has your work with the building, the work with the documents, the restorations, has that, like, how do you have the same problem everybody else has, or do you find a lot of members getting involved with that and being active in these things? Or is it, you know, the typical, there's one guy on a committee, or to what extent is the lodge active and involved? And do you think this type of work actually encourages involvement from members?
Yeah, it's well, it's the old 80-20 rule, you know, 20% of the membership do 80% of the work, and sometimes even more than that. And when it comes to the restoration of the building, I mean, you get lots of support when it comes to fundraising and the activities that we do there. When it comes to this digitizing thing that we're doing here, I think there's probably, John, only about 3 of us maybe, or something like that, that are really,
that might be about it.
Really engaged in trying to do this. Some of the members You know, if you mention up in the cloud, you know, they look to the sky. So it's not, you know, they don't really conceive what we're doing there, but they're supportive of the efforts that we're doing. Don't get me wrong, but the building is more of the focus, I think, when you want to get people involved. When we do these fundraisers, I mean, we do get good support. Right now, we're running at about 44 members. And, you know, if we can get 14
or 15, yeah.
Yeah, that's about what you're going to get now into a meeting.
And elaborate on what Brother Vatcher said, you know, and what I mentioned earlier, with an average age that's nearing on 70. I think it's almost 69, I believe, right now. Yeah. And you're not getting a lot of people who come from a technical background, certainly, and a lot of them have managed to avoid it completely. Yeah. We have one brother in the lodge, of course. He's the oldest brother in Newfoundland, actually, and the longest serving Mason in Newfoundland, Brother Alan Freeman. He's got over 77 years in the lodge and will be 101 on September 23rd. So I don't think Brother Freeman is really into the technical stuff either, right?
I don't think he has email. No.
No, that's right. So, those are the things that compound the challenges, and everything ties together. The membership and attracting a newer generation and newer ideas. We had recently talked about bringing in guest speakers into the lodge, and talking about things of interest to Masons and such. And I'll be the first to admit that one of the things that I thought was a good thing was to get somebody to come in from our funeral home and talk about final arrangements and the necessity of having a will. But I mean, people in their 30s and 40s are not going to be, you know, interested in that stuff. So, I mean, we need people in their 30s and 40s maybe to come in to join with us and start talking about, you know, how to save for a down payment for your mortgage or this type of stuff, or how to do some investments and, you know, whatever 30 and 40-year-olds think about these days.
Yeah, because really what you're trying to do, and I know one of the things that you, like you say, not just attracting new members, but you have to retain what you have too as well. And certainly this is some of the things that we've been talking about trying to make the meetings a little bit more interesting from that perspective. Like we don't read the minutes out anymore. That's been gone for a few years now. They're all circulated prior to the meeting and things, and we try to bring educational papers in there. But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult right now, and of course, with the demographics, as John mentioned before, in Twillingate, you know, it is an aging population in rural Newfoundland, but we have a number of great citizens here who are in their late 30s and 40s. And we, over the summer now, are hoping to reach out to some of them, and because some of them actually had parents who were Masons and whatnot. So we're hoping to get that younger, and it's pretty bad when you look at 40-year-olds, it's the younger generation, but that is the reality.
Well, you know, that's 40s would be, I don't know what the average age of Freemasonry in Ontario is right now, but I would suspect 40s would be on the younger side of that average age. I know in Scottish Rite, if I recall correctly, the average age is 79. But I mean, obviously Scottish Rite is pulling from Blue Lodge first and foremost. You know, I've been arguing for, and I think that, you know, you touched on this, you know, there's no one thing that's going to solve any of these problems.
No.
But if a focus on preserving our buildings, a focus on being community facing, however that may be, is kind of going to need to be one of the parts of the equation. And that's something that, you know, Twillingate, like, you know, I'm a Mason from Ontario. I discovered you guys through Historic Places Days, you know, your lodge. that seems to me it's going to be a pretty important part, things like that. How much coordination does your lodge, do yourselves have with other Masonic buildings, Masonic lodges in, for example, Newfoundland? Because I know there are several, you sent me the link, several that are themselves heritage properties,
Right.
that perhaps themselves are receiving grants or applying for grants. Is there coordination between the different lodges and buildings on this topic? And if you do, for example, discover a grant that you're applying for, do you guys share it with each other? What's the communication like between the buildings?
In our district here in Central, we have a fairly close relationship with Botwood Lodge. Botwood has a building called Connaught Hall, which was probably, I'm thinking that was constructed probably around 1910, probably, John, or 1911.
1910 or 11, yeah, right.
Yeah, and they are basically the same challenges that we are. We're very close, you know. But we have helped each other with fundraising. They have musicians too, so we've done some things like that. But yeah, they're doing the same type of thing. They're trying to basically fundraise enough money to match Heritage NL and get some put there. Now, beyond that, I'm not aware of too much coordination there, John. Are you, between the lodges in Newfoundland when it comes to this?
No, no, not at all. Other than what, well, there isn't, no, not coordination there. I mean, there's some information exchange. If it's read, you know, we share our minutes from the various lodges in the district. Now, and there's some information included in that with respect to, you know, if we did get approved for a grant or applied for a grant or what have you. But whether or not that's read, I mean, is a different question. Right?
Yeah, so it's not an actual bulletin or notice that would be circulated through Grand Lodge, let's say. Nothing like that. That would give people a heads up. Yeah.
So that's the point, though. We could improve on that, I guess.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, John. That might be a good idea to let the other lodges know that, you know, here's what we've done, and
right.
You know, here's your chance if you'd like to do it.
Well, I mean, and that goes into my next question: is what would you say to really a Masonic lodge or Masonic building anywhere, but certainly in Canada or even in Newfoundland, that is considering starting this process, starting the grant applications, but either is nervous about starting or maybe doesn't know where to start or how to start? What advice would you have for those brethren and those lodges?
Well, one advice I think would be, you know, definitely go for it. I mean, we haven't had any bad experience with it at all. It's like every application that you do for government, for grants and whatnot, you have to be somewhat creative, but you just got to sit down and put a plan out there first, and then move ahead. Certainly, if anybody in Newfoundland who sees this podcast is wondering more detail, I mean, I'm sure they can reach out to us, and we can certainly let them know, you know, as much as we can, or whatever we can, and to, you know, they might be able to assist them on to how we approached it. But, you know, like I said, it was easy for us to establish benefit to the community, and sometimes that's a major part of it, right?
If I could add to fairly early on, well, back in 2018, yeah, it's a while ago. But we basically, amongst members of the lodge ourselves, looked at the lodge critically as far as what needed to be done. You know, everything from windows being reglazed, you know, certain a certain amount of painting and rot that had to be rot in the clapboard wood that needed to be replaced. Many things on the interior of the building as well, from our blinds, getting deteriorated and this sort of thing. And we made a long list, and we've been chipping away at it over the years. But another thing that was very helpful that allowed us to put some costs associated with that was an assessment grant that was offered by Heritage NL.
Right. And
we engaged a contractor, and he came in again with a critical eye and looked at the building, with a more in-depth focus than we had on our the structure issues, and did gave us a quote of all the different things that was needed, and so those were the starting points really. And from the assessment grant, then we were able to get use those quotes and go back to Heritage NL and come up with something more substantive. Excuse me. So that was a starting way that we did start. I think most recently back in 2019.
Yeah, and that was, and again, that was because we had heritage status, right? And
Yes.
and that allowed us then to apply for that grant. So that was quite helpful. I think we're starting here now a thunder
Yes.
and lightning storm, because the wind is, everything is sort of half moving here now. There's supposed to be a system going through this afternoon.
That's what my phone was telling me.
Yes, I know. I'm having alerts come up on mine. I just put mine on airplane mode, so there you go. Anyhow, sorry about the interruption. You can edit that part out.
No worries. I'm too lazy for that. It's staying in.
Fair enough.
How do you, or Twillingate, one of the challenges I think that any building has, but especially when it's a heritage property, and especially when you're looking at grants, is balancing the competing interests that the grants may have. So for example, there are some federal grants that the emphasis and the focus is on making the building as green as possible, which is obviously important, not only for it's not only important for the environment, but also that's a valuable thing because it's going to save energy costs in the long term and you're going to save on your bills. Then there are other grants where the emphasis is on the heritage characteristics of the building and maintaining those. And there are other grants, for example, we have one here for accessibility,
right,
making something accessible. And sometimes, depending on what's going on, those three things can be in conflict with each other. Certainly, how do you make a building accessible, but also maintain its original heritage character, especially if you're talking about ramps, things like that. So how did you work with, for example, Heritage Newfoundland? And when you're looking at different grants, how do you balance these kind of competing interests, as well as the needs of the community, the needs of the membership, when you're trying to determine which grants you're going to apply for and how you're going to proceed?
I think in mostly what we've done is concentrate on, the building and itself. We haven't really looked at anything with regard to, like you say, environment or energy savings, making it more green. I know the lodge in Gander, they got a grant for accessibility and got an elevator put in their building. And but for us, we are wheelchair accessible. Heritage Newfoundland, we have a fire escape coming off of the upstairs from the meeting room. These kind of safety issues, I don't think Heritage wants to put any roadblocks up for when you're looking at safety issues. So therefore, we do have two things in the lodge there right now that are not really heritage accurate, but those type things they don't mind. However, you know, if you were going to change something on the exterior of the building, like the shape of the windows framing and this kind of thing, then that's when they would put their roadblocks in. So right now, we really haven't had any experience whereby any grants that we've been doing has been having a conflict on the other side, because we've really only concentrated on the heritage part of it. Right, John, or am I?
No, I agree with you. That's pretty much bang on, I think. There could be potentially, well, as far as green goes, I mean, our building is not insulated, right? So it was built, if it is insulated, there might be a little bit of newspaper or something that was pushed in between the walls back in 1906. But so it heats up quickly, but it cools down very rapidly as well. But we only heat it for our meetings, or when, you know, in the wintertime, there's no heat required in the summertime, or when there's a particular function. So even though they're, you know, having a green building might be desirable, or would be desirable, I guess, in all circumstances, I think the cost would be prohibitive for us to make any changes to our building that, you know, our heating or utility costs are not that great anyway.
No, because we manage them, right? We manage it that way, so that in the winter, yeah, you know, we just, you know, we don't have the heat on. It would cost us, we figured it out there, because we got one guy there that that's his trade, is working on furnaces and whatnot. And he's estimated we would probably, this was before the price of furnace oil went up, somewhere around $80 to $100 a day. So we're in the winter, so we're probably looking at close to $200 now a day if we had to keep the building even moderately heated. So we really haven't looked in that direction. I guess that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Well, for you and for anybody watching this, there is the Green Inclusive Community Building Fund, which provides funding for retrofits, renovations for energy efficiency savings to community buildings. I'm working on that one right now. So that's one anybody can consider. It's national. But yeah, but that even from the membership perspective, or your community, like, did, for example, the lodge have a list of, trying to think of how to put this, when this project started, did the lodge membership have, say, a list of what they wanted to focus on, and then you guys searched for grants based on that? Or was it more you looked at what grants were available and then decided on the work based on what you found that's available to you, and kind of consultations with Heritage Newfoundland?
Yeah, it's been mostly conversations with Heritage Newfoundland, and as we said there before, we had them do an assessment. We had an assessment grant, and after that, our management committee met, and we prioritized the different issues within the lodge based on recommendations from the contractor and ourselves. We made a priority list then. So depending on what funding we could achieve, or what funding, you know, we could apply for, we always looked at that priority list, and we tried to get the ones at the top taken care of first. And you know, after this one now, this year, we'll have checked off a nice few boxes on that one. So it's good.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, the prioritizing, some of it's relatively easy, obviously. I mean, if you have a window that's leaking, or your roof is leaking, you know, you have to get that fixed, right? Otherwise, you're causing other damage. And so taking it from there, I mean, the prioritizing was fairly straightforward, actually.
Yeah, there was only a couple of items that I know in this grant we had to weigh two things at the time, and I think we were stuck between two. We couldn't do both. Both of them needed to be done. Which one are we going to do? And anyhow, that had a bit of discussion, but anyhow, we came to a consensus, and way to go.
And when it comes to forming a consensus, what are, what's that process like? Is it sitting down with the lodge, sitting down with the committee? Do you take into account, say, community involvement when you did those presentations? Just because, and I'm sure you've seen it, I've used the expression before, if you don't want something to get done in Freemasonry, give it to a committee, right? And then it nothing ever seems to happen. What, just tell me about that process, because I do think a lot of what I've seen in Freemasonry is not even about grants per se. It's just something I've seen happen many times is a group of members, they get excited, they want to start a project, and then very quickly it kind of fizzles out, perhaps because they don't start off with the sufficient plan in place. But just what was that process like when you have competing interests? How do you form that consensus?
Well, it was nothing really new, actually. I mean, we have, a core group of people there, I guess about 8 or 10, John, in the lodge that, we have our say, we battle it around, and we just openly discuss it. And more often than not, the facts will put you in the right direction, really, is what happens. And the brethren who are a member of that committee, once the facts are out there, you just look around, you see the body language, you can see the nodding, you can see the, yeah, okay, this is where we got to go. So it wasn't contentious in any manner. There was, there was a couple of people, thought one thing was important for these reasons, and then the other thing is important for these reasons, and you dissect it down, and I think once the motion was made, of which one to do, Brother Howell here, he had 3, I think when we got down to the crunch, we had 3 options of what we could do. And we discussed them over, and then it was just somebody made a motion and said, look, option number 2, I think that's where you should go. And everybody nodded, went, yeah, sure, let's go with it. So it's not like you're getting into a meeting where somebody walks out of the meeting and they're a bit miffed because, they might have felt that their opinions weren't being considered. Certainly not, nothing like that. Not that I can recall, John.
No, not at all. And I think it was, it was important to have the discussion and everybody have their say. And because, everybody has a bit of a different perspective. And
yep.
And every now and then there's a real gem there. Something that you didn't think of. But at the end of the day, you still have to weigh that against what resources are available to us.
Right.
Our financial resources in particular, and if it can be done, fine. If it's just beyond our reach, well, we'll look. That'll move to the top of the priority list next year, right? So,
yeah,
I think the restoration issues. Really, it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. We're just hoping it doesn't take us too long so that we have to start off on square one again, right? And start working through it. So, but this year, again, like I say, we're excited about this year. We certainly weren't expecting a grant of that size this year. Not,
No.
not because it's 50-50 now, which,
Yeah.
would have made it a lot harder if you go back to the old 70-30, right?
So, moving on to kind of the last bit, the way that I met you, or came in contact with Twillingate, which is coming up soon, July 8th is the start of Historic Place Days. I'll leave a link in the description. I came across, because the Windsor Masonic Temple is registered on Historic Place Days website. And then when I searched for other Masonic buildings, I was disappointed that I only was able to find one other one, when I know there are many other historic Masonic buildings that would qualify to be on there. It's not too late to register, but having said that, I was disappointed there was only one, but I was happy to see yours on there. Can you just tell me quickly how it came to, who decided and why you guys registered the building for the Historic Place Days, which again begins July 8th. It's a chance for anybody in Canada to virtually visit and learn more about Twillingate Masonic Lodge, as well as the Windsor Masonic Temple and any number of other historical buildings.
That's a difficult question to answer, but I've, as a secretary of the lodge, I've been doing some online research or poking about, whatever you want to call it, and I came across a site, and I registered to just receive emails from them, and I believe this is how this happened. And because there was no, not that I'm aware of, we didn't formally register the site, but the Twillingate Masonic Lodge email address, I had, like I say, registered to receive information from them. So I think it was, I can't be certain of this, but I think it was taken upon by them to then register our lodge. They must have checked us out or something. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, because we weren't aware, right, that it was actually on the site.
Well, it's on there, and it's how I
Yeah,
can
right.
plus it, and it was wonderful to see. Again, I know there are other Masonic buildings that are heritage properties, and even if you don't even have to be a heritage property. You just have to be a place of importance to the community in Canada, and you can register for and provide information, provide your website, social media links, right? And again, it's starting July 8th. You can create what's called a visitor list, but you can go and you can visit different sites and read about them, and it gets recorded as being visited. And, it's
Okay.
just another example of something that, it's just such a shame that these opportunities pop up and then aren't taken advantage of by Masonic lodges and Masonic buildings, as much as they should be, as much as they could be. It was great to see 2 buildings up there, but it's not too late for people to register a few more. If you have whether it's designated heritage or not, if you have a Masonic temple, building, whatever it is, you can register it for this, and the link is in there, and it's just a chance to promote the building again and show why it's important, and that it all connects, right? I think somebody mentioned that earlier. It all connects. The more of these things that happen, the more eyes get on the building. The more eyes get on the building, the more likely you are to kind of slow down the drop in membership, but also the more likely you are to increase the chances of getting a grant, which improves the building, which gets more eyes on it, which brings more members in. It's just putting the work and time and effort in. So however it is that it came to be on there, I think it's great it's on there, and I've left a link in the description. Last question. I know that we're kind of at the start of summer. Anything planned for Twillingate, either during the summer? Do you guys have any barbecues or anything like that, or into the fall? What's going to be the plan for Twillingate Masonic Lodge?
Well, usually we have our last meeting of the summer, which we have as a casual meeting, and we have surf and turf, and wives, spouses are in. This year is a little bit different. On July the 16th, we're doing a reenactment of the dedication of the building in 1907. And we're opening a time capsule that was put in 1907. When I say we, John found the ritual that was used in 1907 in the documents, and we, with other members of the district, are going to attempt a reenactment that morning at 10 o'clock Saturday morning, which was the exact time that the building was first dedicated back in 1907. So as a rare event for us to have something, we're going to have the public invited in for a presentation on the history. Our historian happens to have his PhD in history, which has been helpful. And he is going to do a presentation for the community, whether it be members of parliament for here, local politicians, mayors. And then we're having a formal dinner after that. And then we're going to have a live band play in the hall that night for a period of time. So that's on the 16th. And then during a festival here, we're going to have 2 nights of entertainment that we're going to supply again by our lodge members who perform. And listen, there's other musicians in the community who have just come and donated their time with us. And they take the stage, they no remuneration, just a free ticket, and we raise funds for the building. So that's about it for this summer, John, unless I'm missing something there.
No, that's about it. I mean, we still have a few rentals and this sort of thing, and but I mean, Masonic activities in particular, the big one certainly is next Saturday, July 16th. When we have, let's say, a bunch of invited guests, and we'll do the reenactment, and we'll have a presentation by our brother David Clark, and formal dinner with some speeches. We have our local senator who's going to be here from as well, and it should be a very interesting day. Very interesting. Very busy day too.
Will you guys be taking pictures from the 16th and sharing them on social media, or where might people learn about the time capsule and everything like that?
I think we will.
Yes, we've got a photographer tentatively agreeing to to take photographs throughout the day, and certainly some of that will be up on our Facebook page, our Square and Compass Club, our social club, I guess.
Yep.
On Facebook, and yeah, there'll definitely be a few pictures.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for all the work that you guys are doing. And I'm hoping that this will, if nothing else, maybe inspire some other Masonic lodges and buildings to take a look at what's available to them and start looking at how they can preserve the resources available for them to preserve their Masonic buildings. Thank you so much. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. No problem. Hopefully we've been of some assistance on that.